Good morning. Just to make sure that this is the crowd I think this is, who here writes software for a living? Developers. Yeah. Okay, .NET developers? Yeah, you're in the right place. We are going to talk about .NET. By the way, any VB.NET developers? Okay, well, you have it tough. Because the tools I'm going to show, most of them forgot about VB.NET developers. Some did, and I'll mention it. Good morning, as I said. My name is Dror, and this is the session about .NET mocking framework. Who's unit testing his code right now? Not, okay, whoa. More than average, much higher rate than I usually get. Okay, so before we start, a few words. As I said, my name is Dror Helper. I am a consultant. I consult in the fields of clean code, unit testing, TDD. Anything that will help me teach people how to write better code, I'm interested. I work for a consultancy called Code Value. I used to work for a company which is called TypeMock. TypeMock creates a mocking framework. And you can take two things out of what I just said. Either you can say he's biased. He used to write that tool, so he believes that's the best tool ever. Or you can look at the other way around and says, well, he has the inside story. I can tell you how each feature was implemented in each and every one of the tools I'm going to talk about today. Feel free to ask if I forget to mention it. I don't work with TypeMock anymore. I'm not affiliated with them in any way. I do believe it's a very good tool, but there are other tools as well. And right now I'm talking or sending emails, tweeting, and I have a direct line to most of the tools I'm going to talk about because, as you work, you have questions, and most of the guys in the open source community will help you gladly. Telerik will also, I have them on my email as well to ask questions about their tool, and TypeMock, obviously, I know some of the guys there because they were my coworkers back in 2008. So what's the problem with unit testing? This is the hello world of unit testing. You probably saw it before. I know I've presented it before, at least once in this conference, by the way. It's the calculator example, right? You get two inputs and one output back, and you do a little assert in the end. Most of the examples when starting to teach about unit testing, you'll show something along those lines because it's easy for us consultants to show a very simple example. The only problem is that there's no way in hell that your code looks remotely like this. This is not a real unit test. Personally, I blame it on the decline of demand for calculator applications. But other than that, our code has something that this example doesn't have, which is dependencies. Those dependencies, the database, the web service, the third-party application that I'm using and need me to dance around the computer 3 times in order to get it to work. All of those dependencies make unit testing very hard. And you don't see them in this example. So what can I do with those dependencies? Well, it's rather simple. My objective is to test the blue thing. So if I manage to take the orange thing out and put purplish thing instead, which is a fake object, I'll be set. And this fake object, essentially another class, a class of my own creation that can replace that dependency in order to unit test exactly what I want to test. So it enabled me to do other nice things like test interaction as well. If I have an email client, obviously I don't want to send an email each and every time I run the test. So I'll replace it with a fake object. But now I have a problem. How can I make sure that the email was actually sent? So those fake objects need another capability in order to test interactions. Test that email sent was called, not test the state of the object. Other than that, help me focus my test, make it easier to build my test. I don't need to initialize a bunch of things just to get a simple thing to run. And it makes my life a lot easier as long as I'm willing to use those fake objects. Those fake objects usually are referred to as mocks. Mock objects, right? Mocking frameworks. I don't like that word very much. I think that the main reason that people don't like to use them is that word. Because once you go into a dictionary or one of the very good books on unit testing, you start to find out that there's more to it than mocks. There are mocks and stubs and test dummies and spies and whatever, and fakes. 5 or 6 types of things that you don't need to know about unless you're writing such a book. And all you need to know is it's a fake object. And that's what I'm using. This is actually from Wikipedia. They have a very good definition of saying it's a fake object in a sentence or two. So as I said, I'll call it fakes from now on. If it bothers you, think mock. Each time I say fake, think mock, and it will be good. So what is this fake object? Well, essentially, every single developer here can create a fake object. Basically, what I do is I use inheritance. If I expect to get a class which is responsible for data access layer class, called the database, save, read, whatever, all I need to do is inherit that class. And instead of actually calling database, do absolutely nothing. That's all I need to do. And I can do it by my own. I just replace the data access with the fake data access, my own class, implement all the methods. Obviously, being .NET, I need to make sure they're either interface or virtual methods, because in .NET, unlike Java, I need to tell him when I'll be able to override the method behavior. And so I have a fake object on my hand. This thing, this behavior, what I just explained, is referred to as hand-rolled mocks or manual mocks. Now, there is a big problem with creating additional code just for your test. The problem is you have to maintain it now. You have another class for each and every dependency you have. And you need to implement all the methods. Even if they do absolutely nothing, or return null or whatever, you still need to implement it. And whenever you add another method or another behavior, anything to that class, you need to run to your fake object and change it. And every single parameter you have to do that as well. If you're using a productivity tool such as Sharpen or CodeRush, it will do it for you to some extent, but it's still a lot of work. I don't like doing additional work. It gets complicated really fast. Not all unit tests test the same thing. One unit test wants to test that I get the right output back from that fake object. Another will want to get an exception. If I have a validation object that I want to fake, from time to time, I want to test what happens when I don't get everything rainbows and unicorns and I actually get an error. So that fake object needs to support at least 2 behaviors. Usually it's more than that, because I want to see various outputs with various inputs. And I want to, from time to time, to do some additional behavior. And now I have a problem. I have 2 options in that case. Either write another fake class for that additional behavior, or I need to start writing logic inside my fake objects, which is a problem. I don't know if you know that, but writing logic inside unit test is a real problem. The reason is it's a problem, logic means bug. And that's your unit test. So you need to write another unit test to test that your unit test work. Doesn't compute. It's impossible. What people tend to do when first discovering about this world, with or without mocking frameworks, they tend to mimic the exact behavior of the production system they're trying to fake out inside the mock objects. That can cause a lot of problems because your production code will change, not if, it will. And when it changes, your tests remain the same. And as I like to say, now there's 2 outcomes. The good outcome in which your tests fail, and the bad outcome in which they don't, and you're testing the wrong thing. And it's very error-prone because nobody's perfect. Unlike some manager I had one manager tell us, write less bugs from now on. Doesn't work, unfortunately. So it's error-prone, and we can make mistakes along the way. Luckily for us, we have a solution. The solution is those mocking/isolation frameworks. Those things are essentially a library, a DLL, an assembly, usually one, but depends on the framework at hand, that I need to reference for my test project. And it gives me a bunch of things I can do. It will create the fake objects for me, on the fly, usually at runtime. That's excellent for me because I don't need to maintain two classes now. Now, the fake object that was created is created only for that specific test. That's also good because different tests need different behaviors. And I can set different behaviors on those objects. And finally, I can verify that a method was called, which is testing the interaction. The database.save was called. Excellent, that's what I intended to do. And they do much more. Some won't, these days, all the new ones will give you the ability to raise events. I don't know if you know, events are not first-class citizen in .NET. You can't raise an event from outside the class, right? Everybody? Yeah. So those guys, they do a little trick from inside the class to raise the event when I want it to be raised. That's very good if I'm using timers that have an elapse event that I want to raise in the specific point in time. Some, especially the commercial tools I'm going to talk about, give you an additional unit testing capabilities, add-ons to running the tests, or making sure you have coverage, or helping you write the mocks the right way. So, but we're not going to talk about that. We are going to look on the mocking capabilities. In the .NET world, those are the major players out there. Oh, I haven't mentioned it. All the slides are on SlideShare/D Helper, the letter D, Helper. So you can get it there. So in .NET, we have three types of isolation frameworks. We have the free open source guys, alphabetically ordered, fake it easy, mock MOQ, that probably anyone who ever did mocks in .NET heard about, right? Very popular. And mock free, which I only put it here to show what not to do. And substitute, and RhinoMocks, which is also well known. Those are the open source. Microsoft in 2012, Visual Studio, I think only Ultimate, I'm not sure if Premium as well, you have an ability to create a fake assembly from your assembly and test with that. We'll talk about that one. It's sort of free because you still need to buy Visual Studio. And you need to buy the costly version. And the commercial guys, where I work, TACMock Isolator, and Telerix JustMock, which cost money. And not so little, quite a lot, if you look at it. But there's a good reason for that. Now, do you know how can you tell that someone does do unit tests for time? As a consultant, I get to have job interviews from time to time because people want to know that they're hiring the right guy. And someone wanted to bring me on to help mentor in unit testing. And he asked me only one question in order to know that I actually know something about unit testing. And he asked me, what mocking framework are you using? He said, if you're not using mocking framework, you haven't been doing it long enough. There's no way to do proper unit testing without a mocking framework. And these are your options. We're going to talk about which is good and which is bad, but essentially that's what we have. You can find other open source things. I don't think they're mature enough. I might have not heard on all of them, but those five are the 5 that you get. Now, in 2012, Roy Oshrov, the author of Art of Unit Testing, which, again, disclaimer, used to work with me in TypeMock, did a little survey to see which mocking framework is mostly used. It hasn't changed much since then. 3 years later, I see about the same results. Most of the market that uses mocking frameworks, and read Roy blog, uses mock, MOQ. And there's a good reason for that. It was the first mocking framework that actually understood something. We can use lambdas, lambda expressions in order to define what we want to mock. After that, everybody else copied that idea. I can tell you at least that we did at TypeMock, because it was a very good idea. RhinoMock also has a very good market share, although it diminished over time because it stopped being developed around 2012. Not developed anymore. It's an open source. You can do whatever you want with it. But the guy who created it, Oren Haney, also known as Allende, if you read blogs, he slows the internet for the rest of us. Write quite a lot. Right now he's in RavenDB, a lot about document database, but he used to be talking about unit testing quite a lot before that. And he created RhinoMocks, which is not being actively developed anymore, but it's a very mature tool. So you don't have to fear for stupid bugs. No mocking frameworks, 9%. Yeah, I think that's very, I think it's more than that. Remember, the guys that answered the survey actually know what unit testing is. Fake it easy and substitute. They got only 6% in this survey because that's the year they came out. Those are the new guys. Today, I think fake it easy and a substitute have much more than that. TypeMock isolator, well, when you pay money, it's harder to get a buy-in from your boss, so only 4%. Microsoft has moles and fakes, which essentially are very similar. Moles was created and then was productified into fakes in Visual Studio 2012. So people use those because they are semi-free. You have them already. And JustMock was a new guy back then. Not that new. I think 2010 was the year they created it. So 2% in that survey. I guess they have more today because when you buy Telerik Ultimate Packs, you get it along the way. And if you have it, why not use? So this is roughly the dividing of the .NET mocking frameworks. Unfortunately, I don't have anything newer than that. And even if I did, it's a problem. It's hard to find all the developers that do unit tests and get them to answer those things. Why do I care about mocking framework? Why did you come here to this session? And quite a lot of you showed up. You might come in order to hear about new tools. Developers always like to hear about new tools, and that's cool. That's very nice. But choosing the right mocking framework is very important. That code is going to get tightly coupled into your unit tests. No way around it. And once you take one, it's hard to replace it. I know that the guys at Fake It Easy did something. They did a trick. They have a second API solely in order to get people switch from mock, MOQ, to Fake It Easy, to make it easier. Just replace some using and replace a few words and you're fine. So it's hard to switch between them. And if you get one of the commercial tools, they are mutually exclusive. They can't work at the same time. I'll show you the demos and you'll notice that I switch them on and off all the time because you can work either with JustMock or TypeMock isolator. Once you have one, that's the only one for you. It can save or waste your time. The right API can help you do things faster. Yesterday, I wasted 20 minutes of my time on a mocking framework because the API was unclear. 20 minutes, and I used all of them in clients, with clients. Well, mostly all of them. There are some I tend to shy from because they're not good enough for me. But 20 minutes I wasted of my time to write a single test just to show it in this demo. And that's a big waste of time. I didn't do anything productive. I just got a bunch of compilation errors all the time. I found it very hard to find why the hell it happened. And people just told me it's broken, doesn't work, forget about it, until I managed to find the right way. It's not broken, just weird. And it affects your design like all unit tests. Unit testing changes the way you think about code and write code. And so is the mocking framework you're using. Now those are the icons or mascots of each and every one. Fake It Easy. Haven't got one yet, but a year and a half ago they said they're going to do that after seeing this session because they want Fake It Easy to show up as well. So they might get to it at some point. So after all this introduction, let's talk about the differences between them, right? That's the reason you came here. So first thing I'm looking at is API. Because we're talking third-party library, I care to see the API. What does it work? And you get points according to readability, whether or not the test is readable, understandable, whether it's discoverable to find the API. When working at TypeMock, we noticed something. We were asked for features that were already implemented because people didn't know that they can actually do the additional thing. So it's very important for it to be discoverable. And we did a lot of work in order to create a very discoverable, easy to understand API along the way. It should be simple. I don't want to think. I want to do something, show me the best way to do that, the end. And it should be extensive, should have everything I need. Also, error messages are very important. The sole objective of unit tests is to fail. That's it. A unit test that passes all the time is a waste of CPU power. A unit test needs to fail at some point in order to give me back the investment I just did in writing it. I'm not saying that all unit tests should fail at some point. That's not what I meant. What I mean is I have them in place in order to fail when a new error will enter my system. That's the regression part. Error message is very important in unit testing. Error message is very important in mocking frameworks as well. I want to be able to understand from the error message what I did wrong, how to fix it, and if I can, without debugging first. So that's a major point that I'm checking when looking at mocking frameworks. Now for that, we are going to have a real-world application. No, actually not. We're going to have a server-client application that reads data from a database, which I'm going to fake out. And I'm going to test the client side. And I have a server in place, use WCF to contact between them. And actually, I just did a calculator that sent the request to the server and get the response back, just in order to show you how to fake things. So let's look at it, shall we? Here we go, Visual Studio's up. And this is my code. I have a client here and the server. And the server implements a single method that gets int and another int and return a different integer back, doing calculation on the way. Very complicated calculation, by the way. And I don't care about it. I want to test the client using unit tests. So the client is the distributed calculator I have. It has a data access and the service it uses, and I pass both of them using dependency injection at the constructor. We'll get to how I can avoid that part. And I read the next value from the data access, and I call the calculator with those two items I just read, got the result, and return it to my user, and everybody's happy. Very simple code because that's not the objective here. The objective is to see how the various frameworks handle that code. So let's see that one, shall we? Fake it easy. This is the way the tests look using fake it easy. Let me just do that. Can you see it in the back? OK. Here we go. So what do we have here? I create a fake object of iDataAccess. Almost English, right? A fake iDataAccess. And I get it back. And the type is actually iDataAccess. That's what it returns. It uses a object builder and castle in order to wrap that object with another object which intercept the calls and replace them with my calls. Now, it's very nice that when using fake it easy, I just need to write the letter A and dot, and I get the whole API here. It's not that big. Those are most of the methods that fake it easy has. Single point of entry. I always like that fact. Only problem with A is that's Visual Studio is trying to be smart with you. If you don't have the using in the beginning, and I write, usually when I write a dot, it tries to put like a invalid exception or something of that sort. But once I get the using in place, it's running away with it. For example, let's do the first line again. A data access, fake, equal a, fake of I data access. And just runs. I like the Fluent API. Very good use of it. Now, the second line, I say a call to fake data access, get data, which with any string, I don't care which string, right? First time for anyone seen fake it easy? Who's seen it for the first time? Raise your hand. Is it readable? Yeah, right? That's what I like about it. Return a new tuple with 2 and 3. Now, I'll create a fake calculator service as well, and create my actual class on the test, the subject of the test here, and run calculate. And then I want to make sure that a call to fake calculate service dot add with 2 and 3 must have happened. That's the test. Not very intelligent test, but a test. Now running it, it will pass, but that's not the part I care about. I care about what happened when it fails. So for that, just to make sure that, here we go. You can see that thing in the back, it passed, the little green stuff. Now let's make it fail. I'll change the input here, just to make sure that the third part, the verify, will fail. And it failed. And I get quite an extensive call. And it says, add 2.3 was not called, but you did get one with 2 and 4. So that's very good for me. Now I understand the problem and I can fix it. That's a very good error message. I hope everybody have the same error message for me. Next one in line, type mock isolator, again, the company I used to work for. In order to use type mock isolator, I need to go here and enable it. And we'll get to why I had to do that. Don't worry. And in type mock, I also need to use the isolated attributes. We use that to clean up after each test. You can either put it on the class or in each test, depending on what you're trying to accomplish. Has a little performance price to it. And again, notice something. It's very similar. In isolator, we're using isolate.fake.instance. iData access. More chatty, more verbose. But essentially, very similar to fake it easy, which could be the reason I like fake it easy so much. And isolate, when called, fake data access get data, will return. That's what I need to return. Same thing, create the class, and isolate verify was called with exact arguments, because the same way I could have tried other verify method was called with any arguments, was not called, or was called with argument, which is like a wildcard. I can put a method in that checks the argument for me. And this is what I expect to get back. And again, let's mess with it for a minute to see the error message. Yeah, running. And it failed. And I get a very nice and clear error message, and we did an extensive work on that. In fact, we argued about it in the beginning. One developer, well, the team lead, he said the most important thing about the isolation framework is error messages, and we developers thought that's a bunch of nonsense, and apparently he was right. Because right now, as a consultant, I see how those things will save me. And here we get, yeah, you got 2.4 instead of 2.3. Yeah, OK. And I know it was implemented, so I'll tell you that we use toString to show you the values. But we also, when you give a more complicated object, we'll go through all the properties and print them just to help you. Not always right, but 80% of the time, that's what the user intended to see. Just mock. Here we go, just mock. Type mock and just mock can't work at the same time, so we'll disable this one and enable that one. And it looks very similar. Don't worry, we'll get to the other syntax soon. But again, instead of a mock create iData access. Again, very readable. Mock arrange get data is any string. This is the arguments you need to specify. Something I didn't show you, in type mock, I didn't say anything about the string. Yeah, I passed an empty string. Why could I do that? Because in type mock, we thought differently from every single other framework out there. And we said, in order to have less fragile tests, tests that won't break on any change, the default Oh, thank you. The default, let me just make sure that, yeah, I'm presenting now, go away. The default will be that we don't care about the arguments. Because usually if someone changes the argument, I don't want to know about it when setting extension. And, well, go away. And so all the other guys, in order to make sure that I don't care about the argument, which is, as far as I'm concerned, a best practice, I need to tell them explicitly. Args is any string. OK, now we don't care about the argument anymore. Return 2 and 3. And again, mock create the other guy and mock assert. Actually, we had a big argument about that in TapMock as well. People tend to like to see asserts in the end of the test. That is actually a good idea, but we were against it. And the guy that was for that was outvoted. So we're using verifying TapMock in here assert. Not a big difference, but still, people care about those things. Let's change the value again, the same thing we did for everybody else, and see what happens. Yeah, whoa, run along. And now build successful, now run it. Doesn't want to, oh, OK, here we go. And we get expected at least one call so far 0. Not a very good error message. I hope that the next time I'm doing this presentation, I will have other results. Because I'm in contact with them, and I want to, that's one of the things I want them to change. It doesn't seem like a big deal, but when you have 20 tests failing, you want to have a proper output, proper error message. So let's go on to mock. As I said, mock is highly popular, very popular. Most of the guys use mock. And the reason being, he was the first one who thought about this syntax, which we saw 3 other times before. I think he actually invented it. Before that, we used to use strings. TapMock has an old API, and you write a method as string. That's a bad practice. That's not highly refactorable way to do that. And when your test fails, it doesn't happen in compilation. It happens in runtime. Not a good thing to have as well. And he thought about it. The guy invented it, Daniel Cozzolino, known as Kazoo. And he said, well, in .NET, at the time it was new, we have Lambda expression. Why not use those? And he did that. And he does something differently from the other mocking framework we saw. He uses builder patterns. When creating a mock, you don't create the actual object. Like, for example, let's say JustMock. In JustMock, I create an iData access. It's wrapped up. There's a trick to it, but essentially, it's an iData access. Here we create a mock of iData access. And you might have noticed I don't like the word mock. So there's a problem there because it's not true. It's not a mock. It's something different entirely. And you take that mock and you can do setup. Setup is setting the actual behavior similarly to everybody else. Well, obviously, similarly, everybody else copied it from him. And he uses get data. Again, I don't care about what, and return that value. Let's the changes beforehand. And again, the other mock object here. And then we do that object to get the actual instance of the class we want to use as a fake object. And verify, again, I do against the actual mock, not against the object. And when running it, we get an error message. Now, in the past, he had a very bad error message, and he got feedback about it. And usually, this used to be the reason people wouldn't recommend using it. But now, no more. It says perform invocation, add 2.4, and if you go with the perform invocation, which is dev speak for a random method, it's OK. I got 2.4, and I expected something else. I expected to get 2.3 from the service. That's a change he made about 2 years ago, because it's an open source project. I'm not sure if he personally did it, but he understood there's a problem there. If you open Roy Osher's book out of unit testing, He says, don't use mock because of bad error messages. Not true anymore, because he changed it. It's a very simple thing to do. Unfortunately, not everybody doing it. Microsoft, oh, that's one of my favorite. Microsoft, in the unit testing world, I feel as if Microsoft see everybody going right on the road and choose to go left just to spite everybody. They took a tool, an internal tool they use for their, they have PEX. PEX is automatically generation of tests. And they needed a fake object for that. And they did. And after a while, somebody thought about it and said, well, as long as we have fake object, why not give it as a tool for the developer community? Nice idea, not so nicely executed, because they did something completely different. What do? If I want to fake some stuff in the client, I press the mouse and choose Add Fakes Assembly. It will create a new assembly here, the name of the assembly.fakes. I hope you can see that in the back. It will also create some configuration for that as well along the way. And now I get two types of objects from Microsoft. The shims and stubs. Stubs being inherit the class and do whatever you want. Shims being use the profiler API in just-in-time compilation to change the behavior of the object according to what you need. Sometimes you need to change things that don't have an interface. And so we get this new class, the stub iData access. Notice this. This is the way to tell him when get data string that is called, string being the return value of that method. I want you to return this value using a lambda. This is not a good API. It's not that readable. When and int a and b, this is how I verify using it. That's a trick because they don't, that's not a real mocking framework. That's not isolation framework. That just enable me to switch behavior. I get the iData access here, but it's an actual stub data access. For those of you who like to see .NET Black Magic, this is the actual class. It has a stub base of iData access and also inherit from iData access as well. And shim works in a completely different way, by the way, just to make things interesting for us. And that class, I can replace the methods with those lambdas by telling it that it has property for each and every one of my methods, and it enabled me to change the behavior of the method because this property will get called internally when the method get data with that gets a string called, this string I just put here will be called. And when add that has two int 32s, which is int in .NET, are called, I just want to mark that was called is true. No point in testing error messages here because there are none. Actually, you can mess with it quite a lot because we just generated a class and I got compilation error using it if you don't use it correctly. It gets very confusing very fast. And I can do an assert for the value I read here because it's just a value. It's a bool. And that's my way of verifying using that class. Obviously, I can notice you shifting in your seats. It's not a very good API. Usually, API are very subjective. Everyone thinks his is better. But here, we can agree, not a good API, right? Another example, nmock. Nmock used to be big in this space. Nmock was one of the first mocking framework, and again, they used strings in order to set behavior. And then they tried to take it to the new times with nmock 2 or nmock 3, I'm not sure anymore, and then stop working on it. The reason I'm showing it, just so we know what to look for when you're using a mocking framework, what not to do. And I don't like saying those things because I don't like to badmouth on people. They're not here to defend what they did. But there are some lessons to be learned here. First of all, they have a mock factory. You need to create that one. And you need to clean it after each and every test. I use the teardown method in order to do that. I don't like to use the teardown method. It means I have a shared states between my tests. And I can accidentally cause one test to affect the other one. So that's a bad point for them. Now they use the create mock, and again, they are using the builder pattern again. They're returning a mock And now we got a very verbose, and it was very hard writing this test because there are so many ways to get wrong here. I had problems here. It took quite a lot. Fake data expects any method with access get data that get data 1, return these methods. Okay. And this one expect at least once method with. This is something, that's the way things used to be. We used to have a record replay in mocking frameworks. And the idea was I record everything beforehand and then run the test, and then I say, verify everything I just recorded, and he will go back and see what I told him to do. When you think about it as developers, it's more logical, because how the hell can I know if something happened if I ask it after it actually happened? Like any other unit testing framework. Not a good example, but here, how can I verify that it happened? It happened somewhere along this method call, right? So how does it work? Well, I can tell you, because I know. We implemented it. You just save every single call to a fake object in a data, sort of data, somewhere up in the cloud. Well, not the cloud, but memory. And when you call verify, you go to that table and you check line by line whether or not that call made. Obviously not line by line, but this is essentially what happened. And that's, I guarantee, if you look at each and every one of the open source projects, that's what they do. I can tell you that's what we did in Isolator. So with Nmock, they have the old way. The old way said, just tell me beforehand what you want me to check for. And in the end, tell me, I want to know that any of them just happened. This is not a good way to do that. And this guy also had quite a few bugs under his sleeve, because if I remember correctly, I didn't get an error message here when I messed with him. So either I got the call wrong, didn't tell it the right way, because I said at least once. Also, a thing I don't like, counting times that something happens shouldn't happen. You shouldn't count calls, unless it's for a good reason. I'm calling Amazon, I want to make sure that I'm calling as few times as I need. That's a good reason. Other than that, I don't care if 1 or 1,000,000 times. As you can see, the test actually passed. So that's a bug as well, and I don't think they're developing. They tried and then said, well, what the hell? So, and it's good. It's open source. They don't owe me anything. That's OK. Just don't use it. And if you see any mocking framework has verify all expectation at the end, and you'll see that if you're using C++, some of the mocking frameworks will do that. That's not a good thing. I want to see in my test, at the end of it, the assertion. That's a range act assert way of doing things. And if I don't get it, that's a problem. The test not that readable. In order to actually understand what the test does, and this is a short test for a very trivial thing I'm testing here. In a real test, I'll need to pass all the tests to make sure to understand what I'm actually verifying in the end. That's not a good API. And you'll see that from time to time. You will, because there are still places. .NET, not so much. Others, yeah. Let's go for nsubstitute. Nsubstitute does something interesting. They're using extension methods on object, which you might like or might not like. It's up to you. And the idea is that I get a substitute for iData access. And here I call the actual method. I can put anything, and I get a return. Well, I can do this as well. Int I compare to, for example, 3.returns as well. Doesn't have to be a mocking, an actual fake object, because they are using extension methods on top of object. You might like it, you might not. I find it to be a bit problematic at times, because you can do some bad things with it. It will tell you that you're not doing the right thing when you do it. The returns will tell you, yeah, that's not a fake object, stop doing it. But you can write it. And verify is the same thing, method.received.add. Also, depending on whether or not you read stack-wise, because it's written differently than the others, you might find this API more to your liking. And it's very subjective. Some people really like this way of doing it, some don't. It's very easy. It's discoverable, although you don't have a single point of entry here. Every time I have something that in the substitute, I don't get much. I just have for that, and 4 parts of, and that's it. And the rest are extension methods that you have to look up for yourself. For example, I have returns, and I also should have something that will, there's when, wait for any args, and all sort of item, which it's kind of hard to do that without actually reading the documentation. But as I said, some people swear by it, and it's good, and for them it's the best API there is, and I can't comment anything about API because it's subjective. I know what I like. I don't talk for anyone else. RhinoMocks. RhinoMocks, as I said, was a good mocking framework for that time. Unfortunately, got behind. RhinoMock, again, has a mock repository generate stub, and mock repository generates mock, which forces me to understand the major difference between stubs and mocks that I don't like. The major difference between stubs and mock, that mock behavior can be verified. That's the difference. Most of it, yeah. And when I'm writing the test, usually I don't think about it. What I usually will do is write what I'm trying to call, then write the needed fake objects, and then go and do verify or not, depending on the test. Now I need to think beforehand if I'm planning to do something with it later. Not a big deal, but I don't like the fact that it forces me to think about it. And I guess it's performance consideration. As I said, when you got a mock, you're going to log on every method call. I guess that's why you did it. You can ask him. He probably will answer. But that's my guess. But it's not that a big deal. So I don't like the fact that I have generate stub and generate mock. I try to help people get into this world, not make them run away screaming. And starting to talk about stubs and mock doesn't get that result. So that's the API for us. So let's summarize what we just saw.
You didn't show the error message.
What?
You didn't show the error message of RhinoMocks.
Oh, you want me to show? Yeah, sure, why not? Yeah, didn't show it. Let's do that in order to see all of them. Let's change it to 4, just like everybody else, and we'll see what happens. By the way, in order to get better error messages, what you want to do is implement toString for your classes, and then you'll get it in the error message. Instead of customer, you get customer ID, name, etc., and you can compare it. That's what I do usually. Implement toString, implement equals. Because when you verify, we verify using equals most of the time, unless we give it custom way to do it. And here we go, RhinoWorks. I got this, expected 1 time, actual 0, not a good error message. Thank you for reminding me. And the reason being, not being developed anymore. It's a very easy thing to do. You get all the information. We know what calls were made. We just need to give it. That's it. So this is a summary of what we just saw. Readability, which is subjective, although you saw some examples in which I tell you bad readability. Microsoft and NMOC, not readable at all, objectively, not subjectively. Single point entry, that's SPE, didn't have enough place. Up to you. I like a single point entry. I find that people find it easier to know what they want to do when they need to write A, isolate, mock, whatever, press dot, get all the methods. Builder patterns, whether or not we get a mock that wraps our object, yes and no. Again, I don't like the builder pattern. I don't like having a special object, but no big deal. You might prefer this way. And parameters, as I said, only one single mocking framework doesn't do that. Doesn't have explicit parameters, and that's type mock. And that's what I like, because I was part of the team that implemented it, and we thought that's a good idea. We're the only one in the world, apparently. And I do consulting in Java and C++. No one thinks that. Only type mock. It's not a bad thing. I think it's a good idea, but we're alone there. Error messages, okay. Good error messages, bad error messages, have no idea. Fake it easy, yeah. So if you get the two objective things I can comment about, readability and error messages, those 4 are my recommendation for you. But we're not done yet. There are more things to check. Mock, fake it easy, and substitute isolator. Hopefully JustMock will enter this list in the next time I do this presentation. I know I'm going to tell that to them as well. So this is what we call API. Just looking at API, see what's good for you, decide on them. I especially like the new 2 kids, fake it easy and substitute. They are being actively developed. You get responses really quick from them. Also from Isolator and JustMock, but they're getting paid to do that. Those guys doing it for free. One time, one of them sat with me online for an hour trying to solve a problem a client of mine had in Fake It Easy. How cool is that? He owes me absolutely nothing, and he did that. And we got to talking. So those 4 passed the first test. Again, you might decide not to look at my criteria and choose something completely different, but those 4 are the ones I like. Let's talk about important thing, robustness. What happens when my code changes? And the code will change. No way around it. Unless we finish a project, ship it to client, and close the company, the code will change. And there are trivial changes, such as a method signature being changed and method name being changed. And there are less trivial, more calls in the different orders. Someone called my fake object in a way I didn't anticipate and don't care about. Those are the changes I want my isolation framework to handle for me. In a word, I call it future-proof. So let's see what we have in that department. And you don't see my screen yet. Being hijacked by PowerPoint. So let's talk about robustness. First of all, I hope you're all using some form of productivity tool, which is also Visual Studio in the later versions, and you can get rename and add parameters out of the box. And that way it becomes very easy. If we look at this is a bad example, Microsoft, and Fake It Easy, although all of them will fit the bill. And I have some method with parameters, and it has a bunch of parameters. If I go here, and I'll change the name using rename, that's ReSharper, but Visual Studio will give you the same capabilities, and add a 2 in the end of it. It automatically change it here as well, right? No big deal here, and I hope that's the way you then rename. Don't do find replace and change it. Add one very micromanagement guy, talented developer I work with, go with find replace, see in each and every place he changed something, because he needed to know. So nothing happened here. Obviously, there's no tool in heaven or earth that will possibly can map this thing to the method name. Now, if I'll compile it, actually, what will happen, it will compile, it will recreate the fake assembly, and I'll get a compilation error. That's actually a good end result. The bad end result is it will use the old one, which can't possibly happen. And now I need to go to a few hundred tests I have. Here you go. I don't have that method. Obviously now, because now it doesn't call some method with params, it's called some method with params 2 in 32 string. And that's a problem. And Microsoft are honest enough to say that in their manual. We don't support that. Very unfortunate. And the reason being, fakes was not intended for this kind of work. I can only speculate that it was created for other Microsoft technologies, such as SharePoint. If you know SharePoint, you have my condolences, but it's hard to develop for it. Unit testing almost impossible until Microsoft fakes, because no interfaces, you can't create anything. And now they gave some way to do that. In TypeMock, we sold quite a lot of licenses for TypeMock for SharePoint, because it's hard. It's impossible to write unit tests for SharePoint without the actual server. or a tool that will fake it for you. So if you have third party that will not change, or some technology, well, you can use that one because you won't be afraid that the method name will change on you. The only problem is it's still very ugly API, and it's not full isolation framework, just part of the capabilities, the minimum amount that you actually need. Another thing that will help me with robustness is the return value. That's something, and by the way, in GitHub, again, Dror Helper, you'll find all my examples. And here I wrote each, you might have probably compiling it without downloading just mock and type mock, but you'll get all the examples. And here I took each and every mocking framework. And so what happens, when I create a fake object of class A, and then call a method without expecting anything from it. This essentially is a simulation of me adding a call inside my code without realizing in the test that the call is made. There are two possible outcomes, actually three possible outcomes. The old way was for an exception. If someone calls a method, you didn't expect anything, crash and burn. That's a bad thing to do. I don't care about that. That's false positive. The test failed. Why? Because you call a method you don't care about. Don't want that. The other outcome can be return the default value. Return the default value being 0 for int or null for anything more complicated than that. Also not a good outcome. And now I have a null pointer traveling my code. It will crash somewhere, not the place I expected to. And now I need to debug my test to understand another false positive. What I really like, and you'll not be surprised that that's what we implemented in TypeMock, is return a fake object, if you can. Not always possible, but if you can, give me an object I can work with and I don't care about as well. So we won't run the mock, it will crash. You know what? As I said, this is the cautionary tale. That's the reason I keep it in here. Because to show you, if you use an older version, an older mocking framework, that's what it will do. And people thought that's a good idea at the time. You called something I didn't want you to call, well, boom. That's it. Rhino mock, on the other hand, will do something of a different sort. I'll debug it just to show you the return value. Well, yeah, symbols. And we got here a fake object, castle proxy, that's the internals for those of you who know what it is. And a null object. Again, not my desired outcome. This is like the second stage of isolation frameworks. That's what they used to do, return a null object. And both Rhino mock and mock, MOQ, do that. Yeah, I don't care about that, that's just to prove a point. Mock, same thing. MS fake with shims. This is how it looks to do the heavy duty JIT Microsoft way. And yeah, I can probably run it. It does something similar to TypeMock and Telerik. Essentially go and change the code of the class during runtime. Yep, didn't fake it at all. Just ran the method without asking me about it. That's not a nice thing to do. You just run the code, the original code. Now, let's go down and substitute the newer way, which is what I prefer. And we get another fake. Again, castle proxy. Most of them work the same way. So A, call a method I didn't expect, get a fake object. I can continue to run my test that doesn't care about this object most of the time. From my experience, an additional call, if handled this way, will not fail the test. And I get to keep running my test expecting bugs and not false positives. Because once you have enough false positives, people will stop paying attention to the test, and at this point, you can stop doing unit tests altogether. The big thing I care about. Fake it easy will do the same. Isolator will do the same. Just mock will do the same. We'll return a fake object, which is the right way, as far as I'm concerned. So that's future-proofing. And there are other additional ways to future-proof, but that's the big two. I care about. Yeah. Another thing you need to know about when working with mocking frameworks in .NET, in Java has a similar thing. There are two types of mocking frameworks. I didn't invent the names. I couldn't find the better names, the constraints and unconstrained. The constraint unit testing frameworks essentially use inheritance, which means they can't fake everything. You can't fake static methods. You can't fake sealed methods. You can't fake methods which are not virtual. Usually, it forces you to work a lot with interfaces, which is a good thing in its own. But I don't like people forcing my arm to do something. I want to do it because it's a good practice. At one company, actually, they said, we want this kind of mocking framework because I want to force the developers to use dependency injection and interfaces. And well, I get it, although I don't always agree. The problem comes when you have to use one of the classes, usually Microsoft classes, that don't have an interface. File, for example. I don't want to call a file in my unit test. Not a good idea. I need to wrap it with my own class, have an interface pulled out of that one, and fake the class. And you'll find many projects of faking, of wrapping part of Microsoft libraries because of that. Now, working at TypeMock, we got a lot of hit. People said, you're not doing that, so you enable people to write bad code. Because you don't force them to use inheritance, you don't force them to use dependency injection, you don't force them to do anything. I said, yes, also Visual Studio does the exact same thing. But people hated us because we have the audacity of charging money for it as well. And, well, I needed to eat at the time. And due to that fact, the second type of mocking frameworks that I'm going to talk about have the ability of raising a flag or marking something in your test in order to work that way. I know, I don't think even, that we did it just for people to get off our back. But if you do that, you just paid for a costly tool and you're not using it right. But it's there if you want to. The other tools use the profiler API, same as every other profiler in .NET. When you do performance or memory profiling, what actually happens, that tool create a new profiler, or you have to register it. It's COM, C++ way of doing it. With Roslyn, things would change in the other versions of .NET, but right now that's the way. And those tools, during JIT compilation, when the class is being converted to actual code to run, we add calls inside, 2 calls. Is this method faked? If so, bring me the result value. That's it. And that's how TypeMock works, and that's how JustMock, Telerik JustMock work. I know for 2 reasons, works exactly the same, and I went in doing the backward engineering tool. And due to the fact that you need to go talk here between C++ and .NET, you can't obfuscate that code, so I saw it. So I know it works the same way. And you can fake almost everything that way because we add in code. Think about it. Every single class ran in the context of the profiler enabled. That's what I did in Visual Studio a while ago. We'll get those new lines. Every single class. Not only your test, not only your production code. Everything that ran in that context. Visual Studio stuff, get it. It means you get a performance hit, not that big, but it is there. You can measure it, you can see it online. We did a lot of work of trying to reduce that performance hit, and I know that Telerik does the same. And it actually enabled me to fake absolutely everything. It enabled me to fake third party without interfaces, because I'm adding code here. It enabled me to fake things that I didn't think I need to. Bad code. One company I worked came in the first day, the code was a mess. I got a good deal from TypeMock, being a veteran of that company. And I can tell you today that without TypeMock, there's no way in hell I can convince them to write unit tests. Because coming to a new place and saying, well, the first thing you need to do is change the way the code was written until now and waste a lot of time along the way is a good way to prevent people from doing unit tests. And as I said, it means that you get to design your code. And it means that you get to do what you want, for better or worse. Now, divided completely between two classes. The free stuff uses inheritance. The commercial stuff don't. And that's the reason they cost money. It's harder. It takes development effort. Every time something changes in the .NET frameworks, it means changes in that tool. In fact, using TypeMock, I had a problem, worked at the company. Microsoft did a security update, and all our tests failed. Because TypeMock bypassed the constructor as well, and that's a security breach. And it took them about 2 weeks to fix that. At the time, we just made sure not to install that security update on the development machines. And they were very responsive, not because it's me, because that's what they sell. And they helped me get through it, but there were 2 weeks in which we had problems because of that. And running after another company all the time takes a lot of effort. That's the reason only the commercial guys do it. And the free stuff, well, inheritance is simpler. You use Object Builder 2, I think, from the pattern practices, or Castle, or both. And that's the way it works there. Now, I like to show the next slide, especially for the benefit of the managers. Choose whatever you choose. I don't get money from anyone here. Not TypeMock, not Teleric, no one. Free of charge. But bear in mind that there's an additional cost, depending on your project. If your project is simple, written the right way, with dependency injection and loosely coupled and all the nice solid principles, well, good for you for one. And secondly, you can probably get along with using one of the constraints mocking frameworks. If not, ask yourself this. How much will it cost for a developer to waste 1 more hour a day, just a single hour each day, on trying to get the code in order and trying to test something? Will it cost more than the price of the tool? And how much will it cost not to do any unit testing at all? Because in some places, when you get there, and I see with the state of affairs, I have 2 options. Say, well, I have nothing I can do for you, or buy a tool. I prefer to say buy a tool and leave it up to them to decide. Getting on to the last part, deployment. This is the part that no one talks about. Well, it's very important to me to add it because no one understands it. This is the inside information, by the way. When you start to use mocking framework, as I said, you marry it into your code, and you want your test to run in the continuous integration server, right? And you want all the developers to use the same tool. Now, there's a price, an additional price, for some mocking frameworks. And I just have the constraint framework. All of them work the same way, essentially. Isolator, just mock, and Microsoft. So, development machine, what do I need in order to work with those guys? In case of the constraint frameworks, all of them have NuGet packages. Just add the reference and you're done. The end. Simple as that. And it's a huge benefit. Because in TypeMock and JustMock, you need to install an application on each and every development machine. That's the additional price. When is it a problem? Well, we noticed something in TypeMock. Our customers, even when given a free license, will not install the new version. And we wanted them to install the new version. There are bug fixes, there are things they wanted them to use. And they didn't install the version because once you look at the development team of 6, 20, or a few teams, 100 developers, you have a problem. You need them at the same time to update the version in order for it to work. In the beginning with TypeMock, when working after I left, I worked with 6 developers. What will happen? I'll get a new version of TypeMock, which is nice, because we paid for subscription. We got it as soon as it was ready. Usually with TypeMock, if you submit a bug request, you'll also get a patch after a few days with a fix, sometimes less than a few days. And then I would update my machine, send an email to all the developers. There's a new version where you get it. Please update your machine, which no one ever read. what will happen, I will wait, and after a few minutes, someone will come to me, being the unit testing guy, and ask, why my test stopped working? I said, did you read my email? I said, no, I don't have time for that. I said, so read the email and update. And that will happen from time to time, and TypeMock understood that. That happened after I left. Now when you run TypeMock, you have the ability of copying the files called auto-deploy to a folder. And when the add-on in Visual Studio notices that, you'll run the right version, not the installed version, which is nice. So I can update only my machine, everybody else get it automatically. JustMock doesn't do that yet, so you need to install on all the machines. Microsoft, well, you get it with Visual Studio, so no work. It's just there. Either you have it or not. No way to add it later. Build server. Using unit test, all of you probably have build servers. Again, with the constraint framework, no job not needed. In case of Isolator and JustMock, you can either install it or use auto-deploy. They have scripts for MS Build and Ant and Jenkins, I think. TeamCity Pro, I know for sure. And it will automatically register TypeMock because that's a profiler. That's a profiler API. It's a COM component. You need to register and do a bunch of things in order for it to work. And you also need an environment variable in place for it. And in TypeMock, there's scripts for that. JustMock, you need to install on each and every build machine. With Microsoft, well, again, only TFS. If you're using TeamCity, well, that's stuff for you. Won't work. When I say won't work, half of it, the part that actually does the unconstrained stuff. The way to trick it, but it's not nice. To run the test on build machine constraint, no problem at all. In case of isolate and TypeMock, there are two environment variables, well documented. You can, if you make sure they're up, it will work automatically if it's installed. Both of them also have an executable that does exactly that. You run tmock runner or justmock runner, and you give it another executable, usually nunit.exe or whatever, and then the tests. And what it does, just raise the two variables. That's it. Nothing there in the code other than that. Well, there are additional things for installing and stuff, but basically raise two variables. That's it. You can go in. I don't think it's even obfuscated. And both of them have build tasks for Microsoft and various other build machine. Make sure, if you're using one of them, that your build machine is supported, whatever you're using. If not, all you have to do, and I did it numerous times, just make sure you have the two environment variables in place. Use core profiler something, one, and GUID. Both of them are written in the documentation, TypeMock or JustMock. Microsoft, well, TFS again. Profiler support. When I run my unit tests, I need coverage. I need sometimes memory performance things to check, and no problem with the constraints guy. Unfortunately, with TypeMock and JustMock, it's not that simple, because according to Microsoft own documentation until .NET 4, when it changed, you can only have one profiler in place, and they get that slot. Now, one of the patents of TypeMock is actually running more than one profiler. It's not that difficult when you think about it. You have one profiler, you just route calls to every other profiler there is, basically. Not that simple, but not that complicated as well. TypeMock also did an additional work, and now they can discover when you're using another profiler and do it automatically. You don't need to think about it. Once you run a coverage or something on your machine, it will automatically understand that there's another profiler in place and make sure it works as well. With JustMock, you need to use, in JustMock, there's a list of supported profiler also in TypeMock, and you need to choose the one you're using. You need to go in, choose it, run it. Manual step, not that nice. Microsoft X, again, living only in the Microsoft world. If it's not Microsoft, I don't care about it. So this is it. You're probably expecting me to say choose X right now. I can tell you my personal preference. Usually I would recommend TypeMock Isolator, although they are not making it easy because they cost quite a lot. And I try to explain it to them. Fortunately, not yet there. or fake it easy. I really like the fake it easy API, but that's me. You can use and substitute or JustMock, although as you notice, they have a few shortcomings. JustMock need to improve a bit along the way. Many people choose to use mock. I don't like it, if you notice, because of the error messages. No, sorry, not the error messages, the builder pattern. But you can use it, because other than that, which is my personal preference, there's no reason not to use it. It's good enough. And it all depends on the project. If you have a lot of legacy code, look into the commercial offerings. They are the only option you actually have. If you're starting a new project, you might want to force people to think about dependency injection. And you might want to do the thing I don't really like to talk about called design for testability, because I don't think it's a real objective. I want to design for code, not for testing it. Then, by all means, use is one of the constraint one. The reason I also recommend the constraint one are not actually this design decision they force on you, is the fact that it's very easy for me to deploy them and run them in other systems. I don't need to install anything. Working with TypeMock, each and every new developer, we need to buy a new license, and you have to keep that in mind. They do sell, both Telerik and TypeMock, they do sell site licenses if you have enough developers. But before that, we needed each and every new developer to have a package for him, which included TypeMock as well. Yeah. Well, that's it. Thank you very much. Been a nice audience. Any questions? Yes.
I wonder which of these frameworks support the async feature?
The async feature, most of them. I know for sure that Fake It Easy does. I use it for the example for tomorrow's session. And I think most of them. JustMock and Isolator probably.
I know about RandMox.
It's not been developed, so I guess not. But I don't know for true. I haven't tried with it. I did try it with and substitute Fake It Easy, works. Mock probably works. But there's ways around it if it doesn't. Oh, thank you again. Yeah.